Alexander Grant was a man who seemed to have it all, an empire built from nothing, a penthouse that touched the clouds, and the kind of reputation that made boardrooms fall silent when he entered. Yet behind the perfectly tailored suits and sharp eyes, there was a weight he carried every day. He was a widower, raising his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, alone. When the invitation to the annual high society corporate gala arrived, Alexander felt the familiar dread. These events were more than champagne and polished speeches, they were battlegrounds where image meant everything. He knew what the whispers would be this year, the brilliant CEO, still alone after all this time. Can he really balance family and business? He couldn't afford distractions. Investors liked stability, and in their world, a man who looked too lonely seemed like a risk. Alexander needed a solution, temporary, simple, controlled. That's when he made the call. A discreet agency promised him exactly what he was looking for, a professional date who would blend seamlessly into his world for one night. When the woman arrived for their first meeting, Alexander wasted no time on pleasantries. His tone was clipped, businesslike, as though he were negotiating a contract. "There are rules," he said firmly, his gaze steady. "You smile when appropriate, stay close to me during the party, and leave as soon as the event is over. No unnecessary conversation. No complications. This is strictly business." The woman, poised and confident, merely arched a brow. "Understood," she replied smoothly, as though she'd done this 100 times. For Alexander, it was perfect. Controlled. Safe. What he didn't know was that this one arrangement was about to unravel every wall he had built around his heart. The night of the gala arrived, and the ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers. Alexander adjusted his cufflinks with practiced precision, reminding himself this was just another business evening. At his side stood the woman he had hired, Elena. She wore a sleek black dress that fit like it had been tailored just for her, her presence commanding attention without even trying. As they entered, heads turned. Whispers began almost instantly. "Is that Alexander Grant's new girlfriend?" The scrutiny was exactly what he had anticipated, but what surprised him was how effortlessly Elena played the role. When an investor approached, Alexander began his usual small talk, but Elena stepped in with a warm laugh, weaving herself into the conversation as if she had always belonged there. Her wit was sharp but never overbearing, her smile, natural. Investors who had once been skeptical now leaned in, charmed by her grace. Alexander found himself watching her more than the deals being discussed. This wasn't part of the plan. He had hired her to be convincing, yes, but not enchanting. The way she touched his arm lightly when she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled as she made a clever remark, it was dangerously real. At one point, when the orchestra began a slow number, Elena leaned closer and whispered, "You know they're all waiting for you to ask me to dance." Alexander stiffened. That wasn't in the agreement. She smiled knowingly. "Neither was making you look this good tonight." Against his better judgment, he led her to the dance floor. For the first time in years, as he held her close under the soft lights, Alexander forgot about business, image, and reputation. For a fleeting moment, it felt real, too real. The gala ended later than Alexander expected. Elena slipped into the role so seamlessly that not once did he need to remind her of the rules. She had charmed investors, handled questions with elegance, and even managed to quiet the snide remarks from rivals who thrived on gossip. By the time his driver dropped them back at the penthouse, Alexander was ready to thank her politely and send her on her way. But fate had other plans. The door swung open, and there stood Emma, her sleepy eyes blinking at the sight of her father with a stranger. She had waited up, despite the nanny's insistence on bedtime. Alexander frowned gently. "Emma, you should be in bed." Instead of obeying, the little girl's attention went straight to Elena. She tilted her head, curious, then stepped forward with childlike boldness. "Hi. Who are you?" Elena crouched down, smiling warmly. "I'm a friend of your daddy's." "And who might you be?" I'm Emma. The girl's grin widened as she tugged at Elena's hand. You're pretty. Do you like coloring? I have lots of crayons. Alexander cleared his throat, about to intervene, but the moment was already out of his control. Elena followed Emma to the living room, letting herself be shown a stack of drawings. Messy rainbows, stick figure families, and a lopsided house with a missing window. She listened intently, as if each scribble were a masterpiece. Emma's eyes sparkled with a hope that pierced straight through Alexander's carefully guarded heart. When Elena finally stood to leave, Emma clutched her hand tightly and looked up at her father. Daddy, she said softly, can she stay forever? The room fell silent. Alexander's practiced composure faltered for the first time that night. The question lingered in Alexander's mind long after Elena had gone. Can she stay forever? It wasn't just innocent curiosity, it was a longing Emma rarely expressed. He had given his daughter everything money could buy, but her words reminded him of the one thing she craved most, someone to fill the silence left by her mother's absence. Over the next few days, Emma wouldn't stop talking about Elena. At breakfast, she asked, when is your friend coming back? At bedtime, she insisted on telling stories about the princess in the black dress. Alexander brushed off the questions at first, but he found himself thinking about Elena too. It surprised him when Elena texted a polite thank you for the evening, adding that Emma was a remarkable little girl. Against his better judgment, he replied. What began as short, business-like messages turned into longer conversations. She had a way of softening his sharp edges, and he found himself looking forward to her words more than he cared to admit. One afternoon, Emma's school hosted a small art showcase. Alexander arrived late, as usual, briefcase in hand. But when he entered the room, he froze. Elena was already there, kneeling beside Emma, admiring her painting. Emma's delighted squeal echoed across the hall. Daddy! She came. For the first time in years, Alexander saw his daughter's smile shine with unguarded joy. Elena glanced up at him, uncertain if she had overstepped. But in Emma's eyes, there was no doubt, Elena belonged. Alexander felt something stir, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since his wife's passing. It wasn't just attraction. It was possibility. And that terrified him more than anything. The weeks that followed blurred the line between arrangement and reality. Elena became a quiet presence in their lives, helping Emma with homework, sharing dinners that no longer felt so lonely, and bringing a warmth back into the penthouse that Alexander had thought was lost forever. But not everyone saw it that way. At a quarterly board dinner, a rival executive made a sly remark, interesting choice, Alexander. A rented date turning into a family audition. The laughter that followed was cruel, pointed. Alexander's jaw tightened, but what cut deeper was the flicker of hurt in Elena's eyes. That night, she pulled him aside. This was supposed to be business. You have a reputation to protect. And I don't belong in this world. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled as she gathered her things. Emma, overhearing the raised voices, rushed out in her pajamas. Her small hands clutched Elena's dress. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Don't leave us. Please." The sight shattered Alexander's carefully built walls. He knelt beside his daughter, then looked up at Elena. The words came haltingly at first, raw and unpolished, so unlike the man known for his commanding speeches. I thought hiring you would protect me from gossip, from feeling anything again. But I was wrong. You've given Emma joy I couldn't give her. You've given me something I didn't think I deserved anymore. He swallowed hard, his voice thick. Stay. Not just tonight. Not just for show. Stay for us. Stay, forever. Elena's eyes filled with tears, her composure breaking at last. And as she wrapped Emma into her arms, and Alexander beside her, it no longer felt like a contract, a performance, or a risk. It felt like home.